So lately, I've been thinking a lot about the importance of living above average. I speak about it a lot. We talk about it a lot. We've spoken about it over the years. But this year, my attention has been shifted away from just going above average and focusing on the fulfillment of potential based on how we were designed and created. I think that's going to be a great topic for today's conversation. So, for anybody that's looking to maximize their life, their experience based on how God has created them, so that they can hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," this is the episode for you. Welcome to another episode of the Reads the podcast with Arnold, Pete, and AB.
What's up?
Yo, people, what's up, man?
Evangelist T is not with us today. He is in a sunny environment elsewhere, but I'm sure he is sending his love whilst we're recording. But on this subject, guys, we're going to jump straight in. I just wanted to start out by asking you, like, if we were to speak about just starting to understand what potential looks like, in your minds, how would you describe what it means to live out your God-given potential?
It's an interesting question. It's because I don't think it would look the same for everyone. And I don't say that to say one will be more glorious than the other. But like I think of the parable of the talents almost immediately, and how the one was given 5, the one given 2, the one given 1. And if they all lived up to their potential, let's say they all lived up to their potential, that would be 100% increase.
Yeah.
100% increase for the one is 5, 100% increase for the other is 2,
Mm.
100% increase for the other is 1. And so I think it would, I think the first thing that sort of comes to mind is it won't look the same for everyone. But what I think it will look like is sort of flow state. I don't know if you probably all know flow state, like that idea of, being so in tune with something that you don't even notice the passage of time. That being like the main characteristic of flow state.
Yeah.
I think that's what it will be. It will be, I want to say effortless, but not in the sense of it being easy, just in the sense of you being like in the zone. Yeah.
I love that. And just for any listeners that might not be familiar with the parable of the talents, you can find it in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. How would you summarize the story, bro?
It speaks of a master going away, and he gives his servants talents, these being a representation of an amount of money in the context of the parable. I think a substantial amount of money, but according to their capacity, which the master knows, he gives 1, 5, 1, 2, 1, 1, and says to them, I'm going away. When I come back, I will receive an account of what you've done, as it were. He comes back. The guy that got 5 doubled it. The guy that got 2 doubled it. The guy that got 1 went and planted it in the ground, claiming his master to be a wicked person. And his was taken away from him and given to the guy that did the 5. And I guess the moral of it was that God has given us, God gives us all various gifts, talents, resources, and as good stewards, we should use those appropriately in his glory or to his benefit at the very least, and not despise what we have received. So yeah, that's sort of how
I love that. And you know what? Just before AB goes, I want to quickly say, if you're a new listener, you'll be forgiven if you're not familiar with the parable of the talents. If you are an old listener, there's no forgiveness here. This one is condemnation because we speak about it so much and have spoken about it so much over the years. And it's so like fundamental to a lot of the things that we talk about and kind of the angle that we come from. But yeah, bro, AB, what would you say?
Yeah, man. What I say is similar to Peter in terms of it's different for everybody. Do you get what I mean? It's not everyone's results don't look the same, but it's based on what you've been given. Do you get what I'm saying? And how you deal with that. Do you know what I'm saying? Some people are given more than others. But it's all about if you're getting the right return on what you've been given, what the gifts and what God has given you, how you steward that and how you produce results from that. Do you know?
No, 100. And you know what? It's interesting because the point that Pete made as well about how how valuable each talent was.
Mm.
If memory serves me correctly, I think when you study and you look at the root words and the root meanings, you discover that one talent alone, because we hear one person had 5, one person had 2, whatever it is, and one person had 1, and we think, oh yeah, the guy that had 1 didn't really have much, right?
Yeah.
But one talent, I believe, is equivalent to 15 to 20 years worth of salary.
Wow.
Which, if you do the maths, like, thank God I've got a calculator right here. If we even just said that their salary was 25k, times that by 15, you're talking about 375k minimum. That was how much it was worth. Do you get what I'm saying, in today's money?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that even speaks to the importance of understanding that, just like you guys have said, fulfilling potential or living out your potential will look very different from person to person. But even if the things in your hand or the things that God has entrusted you with seem less in quantity in comparison to somebody else, it does not diminish or take away in any way, shape, or form from how valuable and how important what you have in your hands is. But yeah, I'd agree with what both of you have said, because I think for me, like, living out your God-given potential for me, this is what it's all about, right? It's coming to the end of our time here on earth, meeting our maker and hearing him say, well done, my good and faithful servant. That for me is, you lived out your God-given potential. It is being like the faithful servant who was entrusted with whatever they were entrusted with and gave the master 100% return on what was given to them. And for me, it's a high ambition, because I know some people talk about purpose and all of those kind of words as though it's like one single thing, which I personally don't subscribe to, in terms of like, what is your God-given purpose and stuff like that. I think it's something that we discover. It's something that can change in terms of what we're given to do in a particular time and particular season. And I think there's examples of that throughout the scriptures, where you see different people go from doing one thing to another. Like, okay, Old Testament example, David was a shepherd at one point, he's a king at another point, he's a war guy at another point. So there's different forms that his life played out to look like. And I think it's true of even other people. Like Paul describes himself as an apostle in some places. He's also known as clearly a teacher. It's like there are different aspects to which I think what we're called to do looks like at different stages in our lives. But yeah, I think the point on understanding what's in your hands, I think, is a very important point that I want us to go into a bit more, because I think in today's age, the default is comparison, right? The default is to, like, just if you just look at how the world we live in is designed, right? Social media, you are scrolling and looking at other people's lots, what is in other people's hands, what is going on in their worlds, right? And so the natural thing is to measure yourself against what you see. How do you think we're supposed to approach that as believers?
Let me take a step back and not even address believers, but just address people in general.
Come on.
It's recognizing that you're comparing, because comparison is a thief of joy, right? That's something they say. But not only are you comparing your life to someone else's, you're comparing your life with your knowledge of the behind the scenes, your knowledge of everything else, to someone's highlight reel. Let alone whether or not that highlight reel is true is another thing, right? But you're comparing the best curation of this person's existence to your every single day behind the scenes failures and stuff, and I think it's unhealthy to do. Unfortunately, these apps are designed, like literally designed, to suck you in. To me, it's unsurprising that the Instagram and all of these apps are effectively bottomless pits, because you can keep on scrolling, like endless scroll. But I think even like Christianity aside, don't do it. Try your best to not do it.
Yeah.
Or if you are looking on, everyone's going to be on social media. Be cognizant of the fact that you aren't necessarily looking at someone's every single day. You're looking at the best, their highlight reel. That's what they're presenting. For a Christian's point of view, it's similar. I think it's recognizing that you are in your presentation, you belong to a group, you belong to a fraternity of believers that doesn't base their existence, doesn't base their life on the standards of this world, and that's what social media will present to you, is what this world considers at any given point in time the standard. Is it this TikTok dance? Is it that dress? Is it this fashion sense? And you shouldn't subscribe to that. You really shouldn't subscribe to that. And so I think for the Christian, I'd say be as diligent as you can in finding out what God's standard is and measuring your life according to that, rather than anything on social media.
Similar to what you said, Pete, with non-Christians, I'd say, look, comparing yourself doesn't help anyone. I always, when I'm talking with young football players I'm working with, I always just say they give every excuse as to why someone else has got an opportunity and not them. And maybe a few of them are true and they're right. But I'm just like, who cares? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, okay, if they are, where do we go from here? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, yes, some things are unfair. Some people have an unfair advantage, but that doesn't stop you from achieving what you need to achieve. Do you get what I'm saying? Look at what you need to do to get to that level. What you have, what your strength is, and work to those strengths. As believers, we even have more hope. You know what I mean? Because we really got a cheat code. You get what I'm saying? We really got the cheat code because we got God on our side. Do you know what I mean? As the unbelievers, they're doing all they can with their own work ethic to do all of it. We got favor in it. And favor is, it's not fair. But we've got it. So, like, my answer is like, we got to tap into that. And knowing that, wow, okay, we're doing what God has called us to do, like, that should be enough for us to just lean into that. And also, I realized that we lean into our weaknesses and be like, I'm not good at this. And this is an issue. God help me. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes that's what it needs. Sometimes we need to come to the end of ourselves to realize I need to surrender this. Like, but in this area you've called me to be, I'm struggling with this. I don't know how to do this. And that's where God comes in and gives us that help. And gives us favor. Do you know what I mean? But it's appreciating what is unique about us and what God's given us. Do you know what I mean? And not looking at, okay, what someone else has. But really appreciating that. And that's so important. Gratitude. That helps me out during a lot of tough times. Is just gratitude. It's just taking time to thank God. It's just finding the goodness of God in that situation. In what you got. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes it's like that. You have to, because like I said, sometimes what people try to do with it, the person that seems like they've got it all together, we try and think maybe they haven't, maybe behind the scenes, their life might just be great. You get what I'm saying? But we try and say that to make ourselves feel better.
It's fake.
No, some people, their lives are just great. That's it. They haven't gone through certain things. But life's just panned out for them. But we got to find reasons in our lives to just be thankful and to see God's hand in it.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? And I listened to a testimony. Someone sent me a testimony that was powerful. Like, this young man, he's a Christian, and he was in a barber shop. And that day was a hot day, but the Lord just laid it on his heart for him to wear a puffer jacket, which he doesn't do in it. So he wore a puffer jacket. And then there was a building somewhere, and he just felt the urge to pray. So he's gone into that building. One thing led to another. There's a group of guys there, and they attack him in it, and he gets stabbed. But once it's crazy. In his testimony is saying he saw God's hand upon his life. He said if he didn't wear that jacket, he would have been dead. He said he was covering his head, and when he was covering his head, he realized they were trying to kill him. So he had a wound in his hand, all of this stuff. But it was like, rather than him choose to say, "Well, this crazy thing that's happened to me," I find it powerful that he was looking at God's hand upon his life in that. And realizing, wow, okay, me wearing a bigger jacket, that helped me. You know what I mean? Why would he wear a puffer jacket on a hot day? But he just looks up. And so even in those moments, if we just choose to focus on gratitude, being thankful, and seeing God's hands even in these times, honestly, it'll help us so much, you know. But a lot of the times we'll think, all right, let's look over there. Why is it this is happening for this person? All of that sort of stuff, as to finding reasons to be grateful and seeing God's hand on our life.
Bro, I even want to double back on something that you mentioned as well about, like, okay, so even with that example, right?
Yeah.
The guy did something that was extremely different from what would be expected to be normal on that day, right?
Yeah.
He would have looked like a weirdo, bro.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
Hand's not hot. These are the kind of things that people will now be looking at him and saying, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
he's wearing a puffer jacket on a sunny day, right?
Bro, yeah.
And I think, like, for me, as you were telling the story, what came to my mind was just how sometimes you have to really be willing to look like a weirdo in order to be focused on what is actually in your hands and maximizing on that with God rather than trying to do what somebody else is suggesting.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that that's probably one of the big hindrances that we have when it comes to living according to your own potential rather than trying to replicate somebody else's life.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to be weird. We don't want to be the one that has to explain why we're not conforming, right?
We don't want to stand out, bro. But you know what, bro?
We don't.
If you put two guys together and there's a guy that is like, he doesn't want to stand out and he's ashamed and all that stuff, and you put a guy that doesn't care, bro, the guy that doesn't care is gonna beat him every single time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's it. Just for that reason that he just doesn't care. He's like, all right, I'm okay with the fact that I'm different.
This is it, man.
You know.
This is it. So I think this is really good. I think probably what is worth us getting into, I think, is also now looking at the fruit of comparison, right?
Yeah.
Because again, bearing in mind we live in a world that pretty much takes us down the path of comparison by default.
Yeah.
How would you guys describe what you would say is the fruit or the evidence or the outputs that are a result of comparing?
With comparison, you realize that the person is comparing themselves with other people. They're not moving forward. One of my mentors has a saying, I've seen it to be so true. He says, over-analysis leads to paralysis. So the more the person's comparing, they're realizing, wait, there's no progression, no moving forward. You know, and whereas the person that is just focusing on themselves and focusing on what they have in their hand, they're making movement. They're building momentum. Something's happening. And I really think that, and then the fruits of comparison is it leaves room for bitterness, envy, jealousy, all of those things. And those things just start growing in that person because they're constantly comparing people. They probably think they deserve something more than the other person. Do you know what I mean? And it leads to that.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that saying I started out with, you know, comparison is a thief of joy. It really takes away from what you've got and shifts your attention onto, you know, what someone else has got, and you don't know you don't know why, you don't know how that person came into whatever they've got. You know, you speak of the guy in the puffer jacket. You start comparing your life. Well, why is my testimony not that crazy? Well, are you willing to look like an idiot wearing a puffer jacket on a sunny day? You know, and also, do you even want to? Like, is God sparing you because of the level of your faith by not letting you go into it? Because if it was you, maybe, you know, your faith might not allow you to have the same testimony he does. So I think comparison, like, one fruit we definitely see is it brings misery. It absolutely brings misery because you all of a sudden have no regard for what you have, you know, and you're entirely focused on what someone else might have, whereas you don't really recognize why that person might have what they have.
That's real, because you know what, you really don't know the cost right?
Bro, you
I was
don't.
actually
You think it's
I was
easy?
listening to something even the other day. It was Elon Musk,
Mm.
and he was basically saying people think that they want my life. They don't want my life, right? And I think it's like this is a common thing that I've noticed. Like whenever
Yeah.
you, because it's easy from the outside looking in to see someone and be like, "Right, this person's got a lot of money. They've got the
Mm.
house, they've got the family, they've got the kids, they've got this, they've got that." Like everything that maybe one person might be desiring, it seems like
Yeah.
they have, right?
Yeah.
But you don't know the cost,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think you also don't by the cost. I mean, you don't know what it costed them to even get to the point where they are, and you also don't know the maintenance cost. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it's like this is the reality about pretty much most things that we desire, if not all
Mm.
things, is that there is a cost to actually acquire, but then there's also the maintenance cost. And again, I'll speak from the context that I work in, like property, right? Cool. You've worked hard to save up your deposit. You've bought this lovely house. Hooray, right? You
Yeah.
made it. But who's going to pay when the boiler breaks?
Absolutely.
Who's going to have to deal with the fact that there's a leak in the house? Who's going to deal with the fact that you got vermin running around in your garden
Mm.
because you decided to do work cuts? Hey, I'm joking. But it's like there's just so many things like that. Yes, the
Mm.
benefit is yes, you have now ownership of the property,
There's a lot
but
more that
with
comes with.
that there comes responsibility for
Yeah.
maintenance in order for that thing to remain in
Mm.
good keeping, right? And I think
Yeah.
that a lot of the things that we desire come with a cost to acquire and then a cost to maintain. And I think that we underestimate that so often, hence why sometimes maybe we do acquire, but then it comes to nothing because we didn't account for the maintenance cost, right?
Yeah.
Or sometimes we can't even acquire because we don't recognize the costs that it actually takes. And I think that's why with
Mm.
any aspiration, something that I've tried to make a more conscious effort of in recent years is anything that I desire, trying to really understand what is the cost,
Yeah.
upfront and ongoing.
Mm.
Because I think that's how we practice scriptures like who goes to war without first counting the cost to see if, who
Yeah.
builds a property or builds a house or whatever. I can't remember what the scripture actually describes it as, but who builds a building, let's just say, without first assessing if they have enough to finish, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think we think about that.
But also as well, I think a lot of times we don't realize that everything is timing.
Mm.
And so like we might even have all those things. We've realized, we're ready to pay the cost, the price. Things are just timing.
Yeah.
And timing is important in everything.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Sometimes when it happens at this right time and you realize, okay, this happened at this time, this could have been what happened. So you might want to buy a house. And if you had got it for when you wanted it, maybe the
Mm.
interest rates would have been crazy. You wouldn't have been
Yeah.
able to keep it.
Yeah.
If you now realize, I ended up losing my job at this time. Now I've got a job. I'm able to. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's so much to do with timing. And we see everybody else's time. We don't realize, like, yes, I'm doing all these things, but it's just timing. And can I consistently do these things and wait for the right time? Do you get what I'm saying? Automatically think when we're doing it straight away, it's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? It's just timing, taking your time. I'm linking back to the work I'm doing with in football as an agent. And it's timing. So I've started since 2020, and I've seen the growth. Now, I haven't got a player that is worth 50 million yet. You know what I mean? Trust God, I'll get those big players. But I've seen the growth from starting it and not having a single contact to now having players that are signed to me. Do you get what I mean? Now, if I look at all the big agents that I'm thinking, what's going on? Why is this not happening? Now, I'm doing everything I need to do, but I understand it's timing. Now, with football, you can be involved in one move that earns you money. That's all it takes. All it takes is timing. So I've started to see that. And funny enough, how good deals with this is, whenever I try and rush the process, it never works. And then whenever I'm just like, oh, cool, Lord, I understand it's timing. And I just start building and planning for the long term. I see everything come together. Do you get what I'm saying? So I've now got to realize, okay, sometimes it's just timing. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm now where I'm at with my career as an agent. Certain things are so easy for me that used to be a challenge. Do you know, I used to be thinking, how do I do this? It was just, it just took timing. Do you know what I mean? And I realized that everything happens at that right time. Do you know, there were certain things I couldn't do, and they were not the right timing. But also, so for example, early days, there was players I was trying to get that were good players. I had good relationship with them, but I didn't have the right agency backing me that I was working with. And also the deal that I was on with one of the agencies I was working with, it was a terrible deal. So I thought, if I even got this player, and also I wasn't a qualified agent at that point, so I had no leverage to sign a player. I'm in some sugar night defo deal with the agency. So well, it wouldn't have worked well. But in my mind at the time, I'm like, this is a big player. This is a game changer for me. Every club in the country wanted this player, and it didn't work out. But now I can look back and say, I didn't even have. My situation wasn't even right to have this player. You get what I'm saying? I was putting in the work. I was putting in the hours. You know, like people used to even say to me, even to this day, when they say, and I've calmed down a bit. And now I'm getting back to it. But people used to say to me, "Man, I see you everywhere, man." And people wanted to work with me, not because I was as great at things. I know it was God's favor as well. But also, they just saw me everywhere and they said, "No, what are you doing? We see you everywhere. Let's work." As you go to so many games, you see the same faces. And there's certain games here that they're so dry that if you see someone there, you know they love the game. Because, like, do you get what I'm saying? So there's that camaraderie where we start to respect each other that, okay, if you're here, you're serious. Because no one's coming out to these games. All the big agencies are going to all these big academy games. If you're coming here, you're serious about what you want to do. You care about, you know what I'm saying, the craft and everything. Do you get what I'm saying? So I started to realize now, like, okay, now I'm in a better situation. Now I'm able to do certain things I couldn't do then. I was putting in the work. It was just timing. And I didn't understand that. I just used to get frustrated, thinking, okay, is this not meant to work? So, you know, you go to a thing and you think, oh, is this for me? Maybe it's not. But it's just like, no, just keep doing the same thing. It's all timing. And then it's only later on when it happens, you realize it wasn't the right time then. You know.
If I might throw a tiny spanner in the works, I think because comparison, I think it comes down to perspective as well, right? Because comparison can actually also be a motivator. You know, you can look at someone, and if you have the right perspective, you know, you're like, all right, I see Arnold's getting the workouts in.
Yeah, I can get it.
And I you know, and it's like, all right, cool. I'm comparing myself, not thinking, oh, I wish I was getting the workouts, or making excuses. Oh yeah, Arnold's only got one kid, I've got two. Or you know, you know, whatever your excuse might be. If you have the right perspective, that in and of itself can just be a motivator that moves you on to do what you need to do.
Right.
So it's I think perspective plays a big part as well.
I agree with you because for me, it's like, giving Arnold an example. In my mind, Arnold's one of the busiest guys I know. So that if he's doing stuff, I know I'm not as busy as him. I'm already busy, but I know for a fact I'm not as busy as him. When he's getting stuff done, I'm like, I can do it. There's no excuse. I just need to sort myself out and do it. Because he's busier than me and he's doing it. So I think, like you said, it's perspective, innit? And we get inspired, innit? So it's like, for you guys, when you share your stories and actually seeing Arnold's progression, I'm like, okay, no one gave him anything, innit? Like, he's actually building. Like, someone might listen to the podcast and think, oh, he had it easy, or you might not know. But when you're seeing it front row, it's like, okay. So it's a thing of, if he could do it, I can do it. Do you know what I'm saying? But not in the sense of I'm belittling myself, but it's more so I'm being encouraged by it. Like you said, man. So that you're right, it is a perspective thing where we can use it as a strength. To say, okay, it could be done in it. It's kind of like African parents, isn't it? My mum would be like, someone got an A in the class, someone got an A-star. Why couldn't it be you? She would say, they didn't have two heads. She's letting you know it's studying it. It's possible.
No, for real. For real. And you know what? This is actually something I remember T speaking on a few episodes back as well. Which was a really interesting point in this whole point they're both echoing about how comparison can be leveraged for good. Do you know what? It's so interesting because one of the things that comes with this, and I know we've got to wrap this episode up, but one of the things that I know can happen with comparison is that, just like Pete said, it's an important point. We can very easily start looking at someone that may be doing more, achieving more, or seemingly more active than we are, and start looking for all of the reasons to justify why they are and we're not.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a powerful thing where we take something that I believe is Bishop Hormozy that likes to speak about a lot, extreme ownership, right?
Yeah.
Where like, and again, it comes back to this whole thing we were talking about originally with the parable of the talents, because it's like, yes, I can say, oh, he's got 5. Sorry, I've got 1. He's got 5. Sorry, I've got 5. He's only got 1. But then what happens? If the guy with 5 now looks at the one with 1 and says, no, I've got too much, he doesn't have any.
Yeah.
Or if the guy with 5 looks at 3, and you realize that all it ends up doing is stifling your own ability to fulfill your potential, right?
Yeah.
Because like you guys mentioned early on, which is where I think this comes full circle, you living up to your potential as God designed you will not look exactly the same as anybody else. And I think the sooner we become comfortable with that, the sooner that when we do see other people who may be seemingly further ahead or seemingly in a different situation to us, it's no longer a thing that almost deters us or makes us feel bad. It's something that inspires and encourages us, right? And encourages us not necessarily to replicate, but to look at what's in our own hands and say, okay, based on what's in my hands, what does it look like for me to maximize according to my capacity?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and I think that's probably a good place to round it off.
Cool.
So to the listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. If you're listening audibly, we do run these episodes on YouTube, so you can always check out the visuals, look at our facial reactions, and sometimes we do some extra features that the listeners audibly don't get to see at Reason to Behold on YouTube. Wherever you're listening, please make sure you do us a favor and hit the like button if you like this type of content. Subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, and do share it, because we don't have anybody focused on doing marketing. It's all organic. You guys are the marketing team. So yeah, till next time.